God bless everybody. Today it's October 20th of 2020. Wow, 2020. All three in a row. That's an interesting thought in itself. Anyway, today we're going to look at what is going to happen in the next year as Iran is attacked and destroyed by Turkey. Yes, I believe this will happen by or around the fall equinox of 2021. If you've gone out and checked out any of my articles, you can find my stuff or any of my articles, videos, things like that at Eschatology, End of Days Survival at endofdayssurvival.com. This is it's just a free Wix site. Like I say, I don't sell anything on these sites. And if you move down the page, this gives you that 117 step flowchart timeline that I built for you. I built a video on how to look at this chart, but basically this gives you from the start of John's vision all the way to the end and how these 22 chapters work together, so you can check that out also. This web page also has all my videos, different articles, things I've done over the years, so you can check out all the different articles and stuff on this free Wix site. Like I say, I don't sell anything on here. I don't promote anyone or anything on this site. If I do promote something, it's in line with my teachings, and beyond that, I don't really go too far into that world. So you can also check out my End of Days Survival page on Facebook. This keeps you updated to all current events in the world, and I also post articles and videos on this site also. So barometer is always Israel and Turkey. So if you want to know what's going on in the Middle East, how the Kurds are being pushed out, a number of different things, check this out. We also do global reports on earthquakes and different things like that. So I keep this updated pretty much constantly as things happen. And you can also check out my YouTube page. That does have all my different videos that I've done over the last 3 or so years. So check that out also. Well, let's get on to the topic at hand. So I've been stating for a while, I believe that the Kurds, the Medes, will align with Iran, Persia, within the next year. Starting actually around June 30th, we're going to see a major migration of the Kurds into Iran as we push through the summer and into fall, when I believe the attack's going to happen in the fall of next year. Erdogan here is the catalyst, the white horseman that's bringing on the sorrows to the world. I've talked about this many times. I believe that he will create Daniel 8. That will then allow him to gain his Ottoman crown. He will form 10 nations. Once the destruction of Iran occurs through Daniel 8, he'll form those 10 nations, and then he'll start to push down through the Middle East, end up in Egypt, and then pulled back up to Israel between the two seas. And then at that point we will see a attack on Israel by the end of 2023. So there's a lot going on here, but let's talk about what Erdogan is going to do in the next year. So I've been talking about Daniel 8 for over 3 years now. My first video that I ever did talked about Daniel 8 and how Iran was going to be destroyed by Turkey. So you can go back pretty far on this one in my world, and actually that was just my first video. I haven't been in that room for a long time. But I want to show what I believe Daniel 8 is telling us is going to happen in the next year. You may speculate on whether this is, and we will see in the by fall equinox of next year. I believe this is where this is going to end up. So I'll try to walk you through this. I'll show you what I believe matters here, and you can decide as we move forward in the next year what's happening. So I went through and updated pretty much all the charts, flow charts, graphs, anything that matters, because I keep adding more and more information. And as I'm finding things, I want to add them to the graphs as I think they really matter. One thing I did add to this, and this is part of this conversation today, is this meaning and timing of Daniel 8, Daniel 12, and Psalm 90:10. And like I say, this is a shortened version, and it's one page that gives you the next 7 years. It's pretty simple. And it works with my main flow charts and everything that I do. It all works hand in hand. I go through those on a number of videos. One thing I did add to this is I noticed, we have that Shemitah year starting in September of 2021. I keep talking about the Fall Equinox and the destruction of Israel, or the loss of their fortunes on the sabbatical year. We had that second temple destruction, and then once the fortunes of Israel fell, we see the rise of the Babylonian, or I believe the Ottoman Empire, like I've talked about. But I thought this was extremely important, that the 6-year end is on September 1st and 3rd of 2027. We have that 6-year end here. And that's right before the Feast of Trumpets, between Abomination and the Feast of Trumpets, right after, I believe, that destruction of the two witnesses. And then we start to work into that 7th year, that 1,000 years millennial, which takes us into the tabernacles here. So that's important. But what I'm here basically showing you is, if you go into this graph to this June 30th, 2021, where the 2300 days start from the Feast of Tabernacles, or the re-sanctification or cleansing of the temple, New Jerusalem, Sept back down. You work back 2300 days. Excuse me. That takes you to June 30th. So just sort of know that I believe there's going to be a major ramping up of Daniel 8. This ram goat war, or the first 6 seals, as we get into Turkey's destruction of Iran and the Kurds. We see that crowning of the new Ottoman Emperor Erdogan after that, because he's going to absorb Iran in. That will then give him that white horseman crown, and then he'll start to head towards Israel. So Daniel 8 says some really interesting things that I think we really need to look at in how this is going to play out in Daniel 8. What's going to happen to the Kurds, how they're going to be pushed into Iran, how this is going to infuriate Turkey as they're moving down through there and pushing them out, because Turkey's trying to genocide the Kurds. And the Kurdistan people, as I will show you in this video, they coexist in a number of countries, but they're not going to coexist there much longer, because they're going to be completely pushed out and they're going to end up in Iran. And Daniel 8 is explicit in how this is going to happen. And it's really cool. I had a dream the other night, sort of walk through this. And, I'm a big Risk fan. I used to play Risk for 40 years until no one would play with me again, because I was always the black pieces. And the black scourge would I'd brutally go through the lands, and to the point where people would start forming alliances on the board, and so I don't have a lot of people that like to play Risk with me anymore. But anyway, has nothing to do with this, other than you have to understand how the countries are laid out and how you would go about moving through these countries, as Turkey's going to do, and push the Kurds through into Iran. So that's what this is all about. So in the first 2 verses of Daniel 8, there's a lot going on here, and so I want to unpack this a little bit so we can sort of see what he's saying here. So in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, it came to pass when I saw, that I was at Shushan, which is in Iran, in the palace. So he's in a palace in Shushan. He's taken into this vision. He's, transported. He's in a palace in Iran at this place called Shushan, which today is called Shush, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. So let's unpack that. And that's saying a lot. He's taking you to a place for a reason. I believe there is a reason for him to take you to this location. I'm going to try to show you that. But look at those things here. Shushan, he's going to be in a palace. He's in the province of Elam, and he's by the river Ulai. So let's look at the geographical significance of that. So I use the Syrian live map. You can just Google Syrian live map. It brings all this up. It shows you what's going on in the Middle East, or a lot of different things actually. But this is cool because I believe we're seeing a movement here that's going to matter. So Turkey has created this 30-mile sort of buffer here. They've set up all kinds of checkpoints. They're working with different organizations, proxy groups, and things like that. And so they have been established over here for just over a year. Like I said, on October 9th of 2019, they actually invaded. Turkey came down. They started to create this buffer zone. That was on Yom Kippur. I thought that was, and have said for a while, that's when the sorrow started. That's when the white horseman, or the first seal, was unleashed. And Turkey had set up about a dozen observation posts along this whole border. Okay, so they're controlling most of the border, and they're working with these different factions. But I noticed they're starting to dismantle this installation here, and they're going to dismantle this because they're hitting a lot of friction down in here. And so what's going to happen is they're going to start to push this northeast, and I'm going to show you why I believe that's going to happen. This is a really cool look at how they're going to do a squeeze play on the Kurds here, and I'm going to show you sort of how this is going to happen. So Turkey has opened up a new front. They are helping Azerbaijan attack the Armenians up here. And so this northern front is basically being completely controlled along the Iranian, Syrian, and Iraqi border by Turkey. Now, the Armenians are up here on their own and they're isolated, but I think that's going to matter here as we move forward in the next few years. And like I say, if you look at Russia, for Russia to actually come down into this Syrian Middle East nightmare, they have to do a lot of mobilization. They've got to go through Georgia. They've either got to go through Turkey. They got to go through Armenia, Azerbaijan, and all these different places to even get down into this area, which is a logistical nightmare for Russia. And that's why I've always said that Russia's probably not the main player. It is Turkey. So Turkey's working with Azerbaijan to control this different front. They've been trying to genocide the Armenians, and they're trying to genocide the Kurds. So what's Turkey's goal in controlling Azerbaijan and Armenia? Well, if you lock this down, there's no way Russia can push through this border because they'll own it all. Russia would literally have to drive their armor down through both those areas, or Turkey, to get down in here. And that's a problem for Russia, and Russia doesn't want to go here. This is a Muslim, Christian, Jew thing, and it's not a communist thing. But look at that border. That's what I keep saying. There's a reason he's locking that northern border down. But that's going to create a buffer up in the north so he can do what he's going to do in Daniel 8 in the next year, and that's push the Kurds down into Iran. And I'm going to show you how that's going to happen. So this Kurdish nation of people that have coexisted for as long as any nation's been over in the Middle East are going to be shoved out of Turkey. They're going to be shoved out of Armenia. They're going to be shoved out of Syria. They're going to be shoved out of Iraq, and they're going to end up in Iran. And they're going to squeeze these people sort of like you're taking them through a siphon. You're going to force them through down into this area where they'll have nowhere else to go, and they're going to have to align with Iran. And this is what's required by Daniel 8. It tells us 2 kings are supposed to be destroyed here. So in Daniel 8 verse 7, it talks about how the goat is going to come across like a whirlwind or a cloud, and he's going to cover the land, and he's going to stomp and destroy the ram. He's going to crush the ram with the 2 horns. And who are those 2 nations? So we have to go in and look at who he's talking about here. And if you go to Daniel 8 verse 20, he tells you that there's 2 kings that they're going to destroy here. The Media or Medes, which is the Kurds in this case, or modern day Kurdish people, and Persia. And so Iran and the Kurds have to align. For Daniel 8 to take place, for it to actually occur, we have to see an alignment of the Kurds and Iran. And so that's what I keep saying. The Kurds are going to be pushed out of these areas, and they're going to have no place to go. And Daniel 8 up here at the very beginning tells us where they're going to end up. I'm going to show you how this is sort of going to happen. So Erdogan is now dismantling this checkpoint here, or this observation. He's going to move them north, and he's going to start pushing them east. And this is important because if you go back and look at that Kurdistan area that I was talking about, he is targeting the Kurdish area. Look at that. So he's in Armenia up here, and he's squeezing this area down through here. He's going to force those Armenians down here, and he's bringing that area up. This area they're evacuating just northeast of Lebanon. So he's not going to get down in here. He doesn't need to get down in here yet. Everybody thinks Damascus is going to get destroyed here anytime soon. I don't believe that will happen until 6-7. I'll explain why. Because as he's dismantling this checkpoint here, he's now pushing them northeast. Why? Look at that. He's going to create a cone. He's going to funnel these people down through the border of Iran, Syria, and Iraq, and he's going to push them down into Iran. And when they hit that area down here, Daniel 8 prophecy actually starts to take place, because look at what he's telling us here. So let's look at the geographical locations of Daniel 8. He's talking about this palace in Shushan, which is Shush of today. He's talking about the province of Elam. Today it's an I-L-A-M, not an E-L-A-M as it is here. And he's talking about this river of Ulai. So where are these geographical places located, and why does that matter? And I'm going to try to show you how this happened. Well, first of all, we need to understand where the province of Elam is. And it's just east of Baghdad along the northern border of Iran, on the Iranian border side. So you can see where it's located. It's at that very bottom of the end of the Kurdish area that I was talking about. So if we go back to this map, you'll see that at the very southern part of the Kurdish region is at the very bottom demarcation just east of Baghdad. We end up in what we call Shush, or that palace that Daniel was talking about. And so he's going to force these Kurds completely out of Turkey, down through Iraq, Syria's starting to move them this way, and he's going to end up all the way down in the province of Elam, right here, into the palace or the area of Shush. And that's important for a serious reason. So if you look at this map, the Kurds are going to be shoved all the way down to this point here. And this is the province of Elam right here. Okay, so they're going to be shoved all the way down. They're going to, all these armies, these people, these refugees and everything are going to be shoved down in here, and they're not going to have a choice but to join Iran. And they already coexist along this Iranian border anyway. So they're going to set up an agreement or treaty with them somehow between these two nations. And then once that happens, we're going to see Turkey run over there and smash them. But if you go directly from Baghdad east, you're going to hit what they call Shush. So at the beginning of Daniel's prophecy of Daniel 8, he's having this vision. He's taken to the palace of Shushan, which is in Shush in the province of Elam, next to the river of Eli. Why does he end up here? Because that's where the Kurds are going to end up. And when they finally hit this location of Shush, I believe that is when Turkey will attack both nations, because we're going to shove them all the way down. They're going to be forced down into Iran. And once they start to migrate down into this area, he's telling us that he's here for a reason. So this map gives you a better perspective to where Shush is in the province of Elam, and it's positioning towards Baghdad. You can start to see how that Kurdish area sort of ends down in here, and they're going to end up being shoved down to this bottom over by Shush. And I believe that's an important thing within Daniel's vision, that they're going to siphon these people basically down through this area. And once they get down here, they're going to start to be refugees. They're going to slide down in through this area. And when they hit this area of Shush, that's probably going to be a point where we're going to start to see an attack of Turkey on these people, because at that point they've been drove into Iran, and these two groups have aligned completely. So if you zoom into Shush, you find something extremely interesting and profound. This is the tomb of Daniel. Daniel is in a vision of himself standing in Iran, in a palace, in a place that he's going to die in and be buried. Is pretty interesting. And I think it's something to think about. Daniel is taking us into these visions so that we can start to see this procession of events of how the Kurds are going to join Iran, and how they're going to end up in this palace city called Shush, and how at the end he's going to lay here to rest. And so I think these are extremely critical things to look at. So if you go back to Daniel 8, he's standing in the palace of Shushan, or in Shush, in the province of Elam, by the river Uli. And you can sort of see where this Uli river runs basically along the eastern border of Shush. And so they're going to be pushed into this area, I believe. And look at that, you got Babylon just to the west of that. And so these Kurdish people are going to be in a really extremely bad place. They're going to be driven out of all the areas that they've coexisted for 2,000 years. There's going to be a lot of, they're not all Christian, but there are good Christian Kurds, and so we need to pray for those people to find a exodus out of this madness. But once they hit Shush, and Iran and the Kurds join, I believe that will trigger this Daniel 8 effect of Turkey going over and crushing both these nations along the Uli River in Shush, as they're being driven out of all their prospective areas that they've coexisted for over 2,000 years. And from all that destruction, I believe that then leads us into that seals war of Ezekiel 38-39. We've now watched Turkey crush both the Kurds and Iran. This is going to compel Erdogan as the new Ottoman emperor. He's going to be given that white horse crown, and this is then going to allow him to absorb Iran. He's going to form his 10 nations. They're going to go down through the Middle East, end up in Egypt, and then be pulled back by that hook to sit between the two seas in Israel. And then he's going to send his 10 nations in for that hour or 15 days. Once they hit the Temple Mount, they'll hit that sixth seal event, and that will destroy all these 10 nations. And they'll bury them for 7 months and use those weapons for 7 years as fuels, which alludes to that tribulation period. This Gog war of Ezekiel 38-39 is not the same as Revelation 20, and I've gone over that many times. This Ezekiel 38-39 event is a flesh war on the ground in the next 3-4 years. Gog of 20, or Revelation 20, is a millennial end of the millennial war, where you see that war occur right before the book of life is open. The white throne comes down in heaven. These people are still in heaven up there, and so that's why they're consumed by fire and not buried. And so if you go look at that terminology, you'll see that those people aren't buried in Revelation 20, and that's why I believe this is so important that we understand the timing of Ezekiel 38-39. But I also believe that in Ezekiel 38-39, excuse me, there are some extremely important things to look at here. So the leader of, or Rosh, the leader or chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, is the area of Turkey, and he's the catalyst that brings on Ezekiel 38-39. But I wanted to show something that I thought was sort of interesting in the way that he sets up the nations here. So we know that Turkey, at least in my world, Turkey is Gog of Magog, and he's the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and that he is going to lead the 10 nations of Muslims down to Israel. But it's extremely interesting the way he lays this out. So what are we watching right now? We're watching potentially a destruction of Persia. He's in Ethiopia and Libya now, and he's moving into the northern parts of Togarmah and Gomer, which is the Armenian Azerbaijan area. So he's affecting all these areas right now. As we speak, all the areas of Ezekiel 38-39 are being affected. But if this has any lineage to it, we will watch potentially a destruction of Iran first, an overtaking of Ethiopia, and a complete consumption of Libya afterwards. And then potentially, because right now the Armenia-Azerbaijan thing is a buffer area to keep Russia out of this, okay? So it may not fall right away. It could just be one of those things that lingers out there for a long time, because you have not only it borders Russia, they border Iran, and they border Turkey. So there's 3 groups vying for power over these 2 groups of people, and Turkey's on Azerbaijan's side, and so they want to push those Armenians out. They're going to push them down with the Kurds, and they're then going to move them all into Iran. But is he telling us that there's potentially a method of how he's going to go through these countries? And I don't know that. I mean, they're affecting all these countries at this point. But if Turkey goes through and destroys Iran in the next year, Then he starts moving down through the Middle East. He's going to affect Ethiopia and Libya because they're already down in there. And then we're going to see potentially these two groups of the northern bands and the northern quarters join, which is then going to give him the majority of his 10 nations that are going to end up in Israel. And as I said, once he gets to that Middle Eastern area where he drives from the destruction of Iran down through Saudi Arabia to Egypt, then you start into Daniel 11, where you have the king of the south and Turkey, the king of the north, and they're having these wars back and forth, and we're getting an agreement between Turkey and Egypt, and then he's being drawn back by that jaw. He's got the hook in the jaw, and he's going to sit between those two seas before he goes into Iran. I think this might be a procession of how these actual nations get absorbed. It's I don't know until it happens. None of us do. But I do believe that Daniel 8 is going to happen in the next year. So I just wanted to point a few of these things out. If you look at the geopolitical region of the Middle East and how Turkey's using this against the Kurds to humanitize the areas that he's overtaking because he's trying to be a humanitarian to offset what he's doing, and he's starting to push these nations down into Iran. We're going to see this major war occur within the next year. Is Daniel 8 really affecting us right now? Is it actually happening in front of us? We will know in the next year. I don't know these things until they happen. I just see these things, and I think that they have to be brought to our attention if we can start to see how the events occur in front of us, how they are laid out, how Daniel's telling us to watch for these things. One thing I've learned about the Bible is he never says anything for no reason. There's always a reason why he states things a certain way. Why is he saying the palace of Shushan? Because it's Shush. Why is he talking about the province of Milan? Because that's where Shush is found. And why is he talking about the river of Uli? Because they're going to hit that river, and when that happens over by Shush, this is going to unleash a wave of Turkish nightmare on Iran, and both these kingdoms are going to be destroyed. If you haven't found the Lord Jesus, you need to get right with him. You need to repent. Find that narrow door called Jesus. He is the only way to the Creator. And as things start to unravel and the white noise takes over, you've got a short time to figure it out. You need to get your oil in your lamp in the next 6 to 8 months before this war happens. Because when Iran falls, the geopolitical meltdown won't give you the chance to prepare after that, or at least it won't be easy. So get right with God, find his son, repent, and the next 7 years is going to be a long journey. So good night, everybody, and God bless.